Rory and Maul, how are they doing? We gotta talk about it. I feel like there was a couple spaces ago where Joe talked about how they need to increase the work rate. They need
Mhm.
to really take podcasting seriously. And if you look at Joe's presence on the spaces, he was kind of alluding to several things about them. There's this notion that his podcast, his podcast is doing the right things because they're making more content, but also Rory and Maul are about to break up because Rory's sick of Maul and Maul's way, and he might join the podcast. But what do you think about where they stand? Do you feel like Joe's critiques are valid, or is everything okay?
Well, I'm a regular listener to their podcast. I pretty much listen to it every time it comes. I just started being an audio listener. I used to just strictly do the YouTube. I don't agree with what his assessment of with them. I think that they're taking advantage of what they enjoy, which is doing like the skits, doing the My Karma is Beautiful, actually ingratiating themselves in the music. And I think for the short term, it's not going to be sexy. It's not going to look good for people. But for the long term, when those artists mature, they get their own fan bases and things like that. I think we'll see in another 3 to 4 years where the seeds that they've been planting are going to actually start to bloom. The podcast is really good what they do. I think even when you take into account Maul's a love and affiliation with OVO, like to have somebody go that dramatic and get into that, like we don't have that anymore. Like we had Joe shitting on Drake the whole time. We didn't have anyone showing that same kind of energy towards in favor of Drake. So I think he's taking a lot of stuff out of context. I think he's trying to make things bigger than what they are in regards to a lot of highlighting a lot of their problems. But I'm 100% behind Roy Martin. I love to see where they're going. I don't think they're even going to break up. I think what we probably might see is Rory start to get more in the forefront and Maul supporting him on the back end. I don't think Maul wants to be what we want them to be, Danny. Like
Yeah.
I really feel like that. I think maybe Rory does, and I can see a support system going on between the two. But I just don't think the individual that we believe both Rory and Maul can become on their own. I don't think Maul really wants that.
There's this notion, right, that Rory and Maul aren't really friends. And is that kind of a good notion, right? Like maybe they've successfully modeled what a podcast should be versus this illusion of fake friendship. Like I feel like if we were a podcast that was trying to sell friendship, we would be start off this pod talking about what we did over the weekend. Start off this
Yeah.
pod talking about Absurd's my guy, Rhetoric's my guy. We be chilling. We could just make up this whole facade. But
Mm-hmm.
Rory and Maul seem to actually be kind of what a good working relationship is versus the illusion of fake friendship.
Oh, for sure. I think just with some of the conversation, like they don't do the whole what I did this weekend and it's going out. It's like, no, I was with my family and I did X, Y, and Z. And then they talk about those different dynamics and stuff like that. And they even had one part where they talked about how they accidentally ran into each other, like out and about in New York, which is
Yeah.
like to me, that's just good humor. That's good, funny shit that they got going on. I don't I think in New York, y'all have this thing, obsession of who's your friends and who's your real friends. I just see that they have a very good business relationship that bleeds into certain other aspects of their life. So it's not that they're not like they wouldn't take a bullet for each other. It's just I'm not gonna call Maul
My best
to
friend.
just
Yeah.
hang out and shoot hoops. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. So if we were to give a report card, what would you give them over like the start of their new deal? So essentially, it was the end of 2023. Their deal with
Mhm.
Sirius ended. Their licensing deal. Now they have a deal with Studio 71. What's your report card?
From what I'm getting, honestly, B plus, A minus. Like they're really turning that corner. And I just see the potential growing. I see Julian and Damaris finding their voices even in a bigger way. One day we got to talk about their, canoodling, but we'll get into that another day. But I think overall they just have a good team.
I have to agree. I think there's this notion that they have to be as big as the Joe Budden podcast. But when you
Mm-hmm.
consider the lows of their podcast and just how Damaris is somehow to me the gold standard of having a woman integrated into a male podcast where it's like
Mm-hmm.
we look forward to what she says, we don't grunt when she makes a point that we disagree with, we try to understand to comprehend, we listen to
Mm-hmm.
comprehend versus listening to respond. Julian, well hated. People they dislike him. But he's one of the big parts of the show in terms of engineering moments. Rory becoming more and more the A Mike, but Maul also becoming hated because of his Drake love. They're in a good sweet spot. And I think when we look back and they're at episode 400, 500, we're going to see like, okay, this was them building up to something versus them just not falling apart. Like, I think they've really rebounded. Even after the Eden situation, they got real good. So I have to agree. For me, it's a B plus, and we'll see though, because sometimes with them, it's 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. But
no, yeah, I just
go ahead. My bad. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say no. I do want to see what you the advice that you gave them though. I'd love to see them at least do $1 million worth of game or one of the bigger podcasts and just get that shit out. Like, not the little video that y'all paid $2 for. Get it out. Get the unfiltered version out. That's one thing we do need. I agree with you on that, Danny.
Oh yeah, we gotta talk about that. You just brought it up. I was ready to move on from Rory Moore situation. Why haven't they done another podcast? I'm not hearing this stuff about a porch. I'm not hearing this stuff about they did it with their mans. Stop sitting down with Kaz. Why are you sitting? You know, Kaz, stop sitting down with Kaz. We don't want to hear you on none of these guys' pods that you did Henny Palooza with. That's played out. That's corny. You want to sit down with me again? That's fine, Rory. But don't sit down with other people. Sit down with the big players. I want you on Math Hoffa. I want you on $1 million worth of game. I want you on Drink Champs. Why? It's been how many? 3 years. You haven't done a big platform. And to compound that, Rory said that they were really going to go do Drink Champs, and it hasn't happened. Ever since that big argument. Remember that big argument they had where, yo, I could never be left on red, Rory? Like, I would never be texting. It just
seems me to ask someone to go on a podcast?
Yeah, and Julian looked disgusted. That was pretty hilarious. Julian was like, "Oh, come on, man!" Like, it was like sound like a South Park guy.
Rory, you could tell that was the first time him and Rory ever had a conversation like that because Rory was flabbergasted. Like me and my wife talked about it on our show, and you could just tell Rory was stunned. Like the logic was just bleeding out of his head.
Yeah, like he didn't even know how to properly respond. Because Maul was saying, like, what does that do for us?
I'm just like, wow. I mean, I get what he's trying to say because he knows that if they go on anybody's show, they're going to have to really give it up about Joe. And I think that's what he should have kind of stood out on because anything else, he was just hiding his insecurity. Bro, you don't want to get on there and talk about Joe robbing you or whatever information you found out since then. So you just kind of get into your feelings when that conversation comes up. Or, like I said, don't bring his name up around me. Like, you see where Maul is at with this. He doesn't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's true. Anytime they go on other platforms, this whole thing could pop off again. It's just like, well, maybe I want them to go on platforms so I could react to it. But, yeah. So I think we'll end the Rory and Maul segment with Absurd gives them a B+, A- for their start of the new year. I give them a B+.